So let me ask you this. You brought up a bunch of other issues, and you talked about Stewart's role and Dana's role. And I wrote that down because I think it's going to be interesting. I think back to my time when I ran these things. CNBC, I thought, was a business network, and they would focus on business and the economy. And literally, it was like the worst night of my life up until then. They made a mockery of the debates. But let me ask you, Aaron, what topics, based on what you heard at the first debate, what topics do you think are important to hear at this next debate that might have been missed at the last one?
That's a really good question, because I think when you reflect back upon the first debate, we had so many ancillary factors, like whether it was the Trump interview with Tucker that were sort of muddying the waters, and the fact that they were not prepared for, Vivek, that sounds like cake, right? So he sort of dominated. So now I think it's going to be just drilling down on those issues. And I do think it's important to know who stands for continuing the war in Ukraine and how much should be spent there. I think that's a big one. And what do we want to do about our children's education? Governor DeSantis has been great in Florida about protecting our children from indoctrination in schools. I think obviously we know the economy, gas prices, grocery store prices, all of those sorts of things. The Chinese Communist Party and their role, and how we're going to bring manufacturing jobs back, and how we're going to stop our infringement of intellectual property. I think some of those are the top line issues, but I think it's going to be these fighting personalities to get a word in edgewise, because Vivek's really the strongest one up there, whether you like it or not. And they were all trying to attack him, but then they didn't make their own points. Like, nothing that they were saying was landing. They were too busy trying to steal the air back from him, because he really, really stole the show.
Mark, what issues do you think? Like, I realized the last debate, we didn't talk anything about veterans. We didn't talk anything about the Second Amendment. I mean, to Aaron's point, very little about China and fentanyl and all this. And then obviously our military and the strength. I mean, I feel like a lot got overlooked last time. And I wonder how much needs to get covered this in new areas.
Well, the thing I worry about most in some of those areas is that it's just going to be a check the box, because, I mean, for the most part, every candidate who's running, they're all running on the same platform. They're just arguing over style. So, I would be shocked if someone was not in favor of the Second Amendment or any of those issues. How they're going to get tough with China would be very important.
Yep.
And I would love to see them really talk about parents' rights, because it's not just about the indoctrination in schools, but it is the radical woke left, the teachers' unions that are telling moms they've got no business knowing what's going on in their kids' schools, and we're going to do stuff with your kids behind your back and not tell you about it. And that is something, I mean, we've talked, and Sean, as you so well know, I mean, we talked about Walmart moms, soccer moms, over the course of many elections. This is going to be angry moms. Because if you tell mom what she doesn't know, what she doesn't have a right to know, she's going to fight back.
No, the mama bears are going to save this country. We've seen it so many times already. During the COVID lockdowns, we saw moms such as myself listening to those Zoom calls and saying, wait a second, this is supposed to be math class. What the heck is my child learning? And I joined a group when I was still living in Pennsylvania called Pennsylvania Conservative Women. And they were these women that were completely apolitical. And now there are several 100,000 women strong who started a PAC because they saw what their children were learning. And they said enough is enough. So I think we can't underestimate the power of those mama bears. But what about those liberal, college-educated, white suburban women on the other side? So what are we going to do to get them? Because we know that Governor DeSantis passed a very early abortion ban in Florida. And sometimes those women are single issue voters.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a balance to figure out how we win over those people and also the independents.
So, Mark, Aaron brought up Vivek Ramaswamy. We had him on the show on Friday night. How much do you think the candidates are going to adjust their strategy, thinking, okay, how do I either be louder than him? How do I combat him? Like, what if you were advising one of these guys, and you've been in this for a while, what would you say changes strategy-wise because of the Vivek factor?
Well, I think the first thing is I would almost approach it like you would with Donald Trump. You can't out-Trump Trump.
Right.
You're not going to out-Vivek. That's hard to say. So you can't do that more. So even if you take a shot at him, I do think that the candidates spent too much time directly attacking him and then not pivoting to why they had the better future or the better alternative. So if you want to say that you're inexperienced on, say, foreign policy, like I think Nikki Haley did, then turn to the camera or turn to the moderator and talk about the importance of why we need someone seasoned going up against Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping, because we don't have time to do, on-the-job training, but you never connected the dots with the people at home about why it was important.
Well, do you know what I thought when you said that, by the way? It was interesting. Your old boss, Mike Pence, said that, right? We don't have time to do on-the-job training. And yet, to be fair, he was vice president to President Trump, who, I get it, very different experiences, but he had never served in government. And I'm thinking to myself, Mike Pence is out there talking about don't have time to do on-the-job training. We don't need a rookie. And I'm like, well, the last time we had a rookie and it turned out pretty well. So I just, to your point, I think you have to figure out how do you pivot in a way that doesn't leave you vulnerable. Because if I was Vivek, I'd say, wait a second, you keep complimenting a guy that wasn't in government, that had all these successes, and it worked out pretty well, right?
Well, this really is where they misread the electorate right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they elected Donald Trump in 2016 because he was the outsider.
Yeah.
They were sick and tired of being lied to by politicians of both parties who said they were going to do all these things and then never did them. So to try to say, well, we don't need an outsider this time, but you want the insider, is just really misreading where the people are. They just want stuff done.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. I don't think the electorate right now wants someone from the inside. The drain the swamp statement went really far and resonated with a lot of people. And the people that came out and voted for Donald Trump, many of whom never voted before, he spoke to them because he was talking to them like they were people, they had a voice and it mattered. The career politicians were something that they were just not interested in. So to say now you sort of want this smarmy insider is definitely not reading the room or the electorate. And that's why I do think that Vivek is a really good second option because he's from the outside. He's willing to stand up to the establishment. And when Nikki Haley yelled at him on the stage, she sounded like she was screaming at an insolent child, and it did not play well.
But you say that, Aaron, but the funny thing about it is I kind of agree with you. I watched it and I said, I agree with what both of you are saying, that I was like, I'm not sure I'd be leaning into how long I've been in government on that stage because I'm not sure. But the funny thing is, at least the polling in the early states, in Iowa and especially in New Hampshire, she's actually gotten, I mean, granted, we're talking like 2 or 3 points and she's still at 10%, but she seems to have at least benefited with some kind of group based on her performance.
I mean, it's hard to say right now because we are still so early. And I think that Trump did suck so much air out of that room. And looking at the numbers, it is changing. But I don't think that they're putting a massive dent into the polling numbers by these debates. They're sort of chipping away. But the elephant in the room, proverbially and metaphorically and every other possible way, is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And that's who basically everyone wants. And the rest of this is sort of like a cute dog and pony show until further notice.
So, Mark, do you agree with that? I sort of been asking this question over and over again about whether or not the debates move the needle. I think Aaron's got a great point. I mean, it's a good show. But do they move the needle, number one? And number two is, if they do move the needle, pro or con, like I look at Asa Hutchinson after that last debate and I think, okay, dude, maybe it's time to go. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure you click the link below to find out more, or you can go to SeanSpicerShow.com to stay up to date on all my content.